Hello everyone, my name is Cynthia and these are the books that I read in 2024. The first book that I read was When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain by Nevo. It's the second book in the Singing Hills cycle. We follow the cleric Chi and their companion, almost brilliant again in the second book like we did in the first book. I enjoyed reading this. I thought the author Nevo has created like a perfect world, and I gave it 5 stars. I enjoyed it more than the first book. The second book that I read was Everything You Ever Wanted by Louisa Salma. It's set in a dystopian world where we follow this British girl called Iris, and in this world they have found an alternate planet called Nyx, and they're recruiting people who will be going to the planet to start like a human population over there. So our main character is bored, she's depressed, she decides to apply to the program and she gets in. We follow her as she travels to the new planet. I also enjoyed reading this book. I thought it was well written. I was heavily invested, and it has an ambiguous ending, and I found this to be so interesting. I still think about the ending to this day. But that book I read in 2024 was Foster by Claire Keegan. In this book we follow a young girl that has been taken by her father to live with her uncle in the rural countryside of Ireland. Here I found that the author Claire Keegan has written a marvelous book about a day-to-day life, the magic of a day-to-day life. I found it quite similar. I found it quite similar to Young Mango by Douglas Stewart. The fourth and fifth book I read, they are graphic novels. I don't remember much about the plot of these two books. I know it has something to do with fighting in the air, and it's also a queer book, so that was nice. I read them quite quickly. They're the only graphic novels I read in 2024. I found them okay. I think I gave them 3.54 stars. The next book that I read was really good actually, by Monica. We follow a young woman as she's dealing with the aftermath of her breakup with, I think, her fiance. We get to see her grow, we get to see her learn, and it was really beautiful to read. I still think about this book to this day. The next book that I read was The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. Considering I only read 17 books, this was really a standout. I enjoyed the setting. I really enjoyed the setting. I still remember it to this day. I came to realize that, wait, you know what, maybe I like historical fiction. We follow this young lady. She lives in Spain. She's Jewish, and she has to hide her identity. She also has magic, and we sort of follow her along this journey of hers finding love. It's really a standard. It's an adult fantasy, historical fiction. And I thought our main character was wonderful. It was poetic, it was beautifully written. I gave it 5 stars. The next that I read was If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. I gave it 4 stars. It follows a group of friends at an elite college where they study Shakespeare. I loved the setting of this book. I loved the writing. At the heart is a murder, and as the book progresses we try and solve it. The next book that I read was Boy Parts by Eliza Clark. I gave it 3 stars. The book needed a bit more time to brew. It was quite grotesque. The book, in my opinion, needed a bit more time before we got to read it. I felt like for the characters to feel real, we needed more time. I gave it 3 stars. It has great potential. The next book that I read was Uglies. as well as Pretties. I read Uglies and Pretties by Scott Westerfield. It's also a dystopian novel that follows this girl that lives in a world where everyone undergoes plastic surgery once they turn 16. Everything that's wrong with humanity, it was in this world they somehow found out that the only way to solve this was to make everyone beautiful. But you know, she's been conditioned to accept this surgery, her and her friends, her and everyone that she knows. I read the first and second book in the series. This was around the time that the movie was coming out, and I gave the first book 5 stars and the second book I gave it 4 stars. Definitely there are parallels between that world and the world that we live in. The next book that I read was The Space Between Worlds by Micaiah Johnson. I loved it. This is also another 5-star. In this sort of like desert, they've discovered that alternate universes exist, and our main character, she moves from one universe to the other. They found a way to travel between the worlds, but it can only occur if the alternate you has died. You can now travel to the other world, and our main character, she's perfect for this because out of all the worlds that they have discovered, she's dead in most of them. The next book that I read was Into the Riverlands by Nevo. I thought it was quite rushed. The world wasn't giving me anything extra. The next book that I read was Daughter in Exile by BC Ajapon. We follow a young woman who lives in Senegal, Dakar, and she lives quite a beautiful life. She finds herself undocumented in the US, and we sort of follow her along this journey as she comes to terms with what it means to live in the United States as a poor person, as an undocumented person. She ponders what it means really to be living in the first world country, but poor, versus living, you know, in Senegal where she was living a really good life. Throughout the book, I kept asking myself, you know, why don't you go back home? Just go back home. The next book that I read was Diary of a Void by Emi Yagi. Our main character is Japanese, and she has to fake a pregnancy. She has to pretend that she's pregnant. I ended up giving it 3 stars. I wish it was, it was longer. The next book that I read was I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hackman. It was quite heartbreaking. Our main character was kidnapped and put in a bunker with 39 other women while she was a young child. She doesn't have much recollection of the actual world because they've been living in the bunker for a while now. Really broke my heart. I gave it 5 stars. I think about it all the time now. The next book that I read was Thicker Than Water by Kelly Washington. It's a memoir by, the actress. The connections that she makes in her book are, really wonderful. She was quite honest with us. At the heart of this book is quite, a big secret that her parents have been keeping from her. I enjoyed reading this book. I gave it, I gave it 5 stars. Okay, it's maybe like a 4.75. Those are all the books that I read in 2024. Thanks so much for watching.